Hello there, Alaskans, wherever you are. Welcome to the Must Read Alaska Show, coming to you from somewhere in Alaska. This is the place where we talk about, you guessed it, Alaska, where we keep the mainstream media on their toes and where we are standing up for what's right in a world run by leftists. You can find out more by heading over to mustreadalaska.com and also checking out the Must Read Alaska YouTube channel for some really great content. But first, let's get this party started. What's good, Alaska? This is Scott Levesque, and you're listening to the Midweek Edition of the Must Read Alaska podcast. I want to welcome everybody. And before we get started, I just want you to take a minute or two to go ahead and give us a 5-star review. It really helps us in our search rankings. It helps us when people are searching for Alaska politics. It pulls our podcast up amongst the first that are on the populated list. So if you can do that, that'd be phenomenal. We appreciate all of our listeners, supporters, and our readers. Also, if you want to take the next step, you can go ahead and give us a written review. We love hearing feedback from all of our listeners. It's been positive. We've really loved any kind of constructive criticism, but it's been mainly positive, and that's been great. So if you want to take just some additional time and give us a written review, that would be phenomenal as well. Well, we got a lot to talk to today, but I got a special kind of co-host with me, Spencer Moore, and he's the Region 3 representative for the Republican Party in Alaska. Spencer, how you doing?
I'm great. How are you, Scott?
I'm excellent. We got a lot to dive into, but before we do that, let's give our listeners a little bit of background on who you are and what you do for the Republican Party, if you don't mind.
Absolutely. So, yeah, I've been volunteering with the Republican Party for a couple of years now. I started off as a district chair of District 27 here in East Anchorage, and I did that for about a year. And this past year, I moved up to the Region Rep, Region 3, which covers East Anchorage, Eagle River, Chugach area. And so I'm over 5 districts now. And Republican politics, always fun and always things to continue to move towards. But that's what I do. And local politics is definitely interesting.
Especially in Anchorage.
Yeah. And definitely recently with this assembly and the elections this past year, been very interesting. So
Spencer's got a lot of information, and he's going to be a great co-host with me today, so I'm really excited to have him here. And what we normally do is we're going to do some quick hits today, and we've got a couple of stories that I want to touch on. But the first one I want to touch on is this national news that Governor Dunleavy made and the state of Alaska made, which is now the governor has extended all vaccinations to, well, I shouldn't say all. There are some vaccinations that are extended to 16-year-olds. Some of them are 18-year-olds, but he's opened up the vaccinations that are available. So to just be a little bit more precise on some of these things, right now, the Pfizer vaccination is going to be open to individuals that are 16 and older, whereas the Johnson & Johnson, that's the single-shot vaccination, and the, I always say this wrong. Moderna, there it is, is available for people that are 18 and older. So both of those are 18 and older. And it made national news. Maybe some people feel like that's a great thing. Some people feel like that's not such a great thing. But generally speaking, it's positive, I think. And the hope is that with now the vaccinations being opened up to 16 years old and older, so that everybody that wants to get one, currently not mandated, but wants to get one and exercise that right, can do so. And I know our listeners have varying opinions and responses on that when it comes to the vaccination in general. The question remains is a couple things, Spencer, and I want you to kind of give me your perspective on this before we dive into some other things that are interesting about Alaska that we've kind of dug up as well. But the first is, what do you think this does for the state? Does it open back up the economy? Does it help us here? And you and I both live in Anchorage, and we know that the emergency orders right now are pretty stringent still. So do you think this opens up and releases everybody from wearing masks and quantity of people in stores, or do you think this is just good PR? Generally speaking, but it's not going to change a lot.
Well, I think number one, I think it's a win for the governor. I think it's good on him for obviously, getting that number one mark for his administration. I do think it puts the pressure on not only the Anchorage Assembly, but really the acting mayor to say, the numbers really are trending towards really the end of this thing, the end of the pandemic. And so I think people want to see businesses back open at full capacity. I think people want the option to wear a face mask or not wear a face mask in the municipality. I think you see we don't have the mandate across the whole state. It's really just the municipality of Anchorage and certain other other municipalities across the state have opted to go that route. But I think as more and more people get vaccinated, I think that just puts the pressure on the leadership to say, you know what, let's go ahead and move forward to open the economy, and let's get our people back to somewhat normal. I mean, I think that people are ready for that. Springtime's coming, which means tourist season and other things to try to boost the state, and just I think people are ready for it.
Yeah, and I think that goes and coincides a lot with what we're seeing in the statistical data. Our 7-day average of new cases is about 131. Today we had, I say the 9th, we've had about 89 cases. The new number isn't out, or at least I can't find it right now. But yesterday we had 89 new cases, and on the 7-day average of deaths right now, it's at 0.
Right.
And we haven't had any deaths for the last 7 days. So there is and if you look at the graph itself, you're seeing a dramatic drop in daily cases around the state. You're seeing obviously a drop in deaths. So you would think that this now, with the vaccination being open up to anybody that wants it with the ages of 16 and over, we should start seeing schools open up without restrictions, right?
Absolutely. And I think you made a good point. Anybody who wants to get it, everybody who has, you have the choice, you have the option to do it. And I think that's going to be a big thing too, because I know some people are pro-vaccine, some people are anti. I think the main thing is you have the choice. You have the choice to be able to make an informed decision based on your health as a free American, because we still are Americans. We're not, we still have that option. So I think that's the beautiful thing that, living in America is to be able to have that choice. So I think it puts the pressure on the school district as well. Hey, let's get back to, obviously if we want to, do it with get our teachers vaccinated and school officials, then I think it totally puts the pressure on them. I think, whether it be with, the mask issue with student athletes playing sports, I think that, it puts even more pressure on, if an official is vaccinated, or if, the capacity of fans. I think we've got to get back to somewhat normal. I think we've got to move towards that direction. I don't think we want to take a step back. So I think it's only positive moving forward.
Yeah, I agree. And I think one of the things that you and I have talked about is sort of, now that we're kind of on the downward trend, at least when we talk about the numbers and we talk about the fact that the vaccines is going to be open up for choice to take, it really brings into mind, into the forefront, the ripple effect and really the collateral damage of what this pandemic has done to a state that already has some deficiencies in areas that are glaring. And, you and I have talked about this at extent. There are some areas that are glaring right now and have only gotten worse. Absolutely. And so, again, this is Insider Baseball with you and I talking about this. What are some of the things that you're seeing right now that are just, not only were they detrimental before the pandemic, they've only gotten worse?
Well, yeah, and I was reading an article recently that had the states ranked, and so I think the state of Alaska really, as a whole, should be focusing on some of the other issues that we're facing as a state. Education, we're ranked 49th nationally. I did see another. There was a video recently that came out. I think it was from one of the Senate hearings or one of the House hearings that just said, "Hey, our results are some of them are as bad as a third world country." And so I think 49th in education out of 50 states. The economy was ranked 50th, and then the crime and corrections was ranked 49th. So those are some huge red flags and huge issues. We've obviously seen a trend of people moving out of the state. Obviously, we know the Biden administration is not energy friendly as far as the state of Alaska goes. So I think we've got some real issues here. I think COVID, we need to kind of put it behind us, move towards some of the things that are staring us in the face. We've got to make some hard decisions, whether that be cuts, which I'm a big proponent of that as far as the state level goes. But I think people have got to start stepping up, taking leadership, and making some tough decisions, because I'm not mortgaging, or I don't want to see us mortgaging our future to our kids,
right?
Because that's what we're doing right now. So.
Yeah, I think you raised some really important questions and facts. And the problem is that we are at the bottom quarter. We're 49th or 50th, depending on what you're looking at in terms of rankings. And so it really brings a larger point to mind right now. Now that everything's going to be open, and again, great PR, great opportunity. What are one of the things that I think a lot of Alaskans are looking at after the election is how we do elections.
Right.
Ballot Measure 2 passes. It's going to totally revolutionize what we do in terms of how we do elections here in Alaska.
Right.
We've got an election coming up for the Anchorage mayor race. So we've got that, and it's all mail-in ballots, all right, which is already making people uneasy because it's hard to regulate. It's hard to do that. What COVID did is it gave a sort of a trial ground to see how we could do elections without actually showing up to polls anymore. And you and I have talked about this. Republicans show up to polls, Dems don't.
Correct.
Just generally speaking. What do you foresee in the future here in Alaska for elections? As being the regional rep, you interact with a lot of the districts. You interact with a lot of Republicans and even conservatives. Not every conservative is a Republican, but with both, who are concerned about election, not just integrity, but our election process moving forward.
Right.
Can you kind of clue us in a little bit on what your thoughts are on that?
That's a big issue for all voters, but specifically conservative voters who do feel like the past election had issues, and whether you're in one camp or the other with the fraud or without the fraud, I do think that we've seen states around the country have issues with the different policies and procedures they put in place, whether that's mail-in ballots, whether that's these drop boxes that certain states have in certain places and not others, whether they have polling locations open at certain certain times or not. I think chain of custody and all these different issues that we see, and Anchorage obviously has been doing the mail-in voting for a few years now, a few election cycles. So I think that we may not even know if our election system has those issues because we've kind of we've had a few. We haven't seen any major issues. I say that because I don't feel like it's publicized like the national news media does with a presidential election. But I do feel like, it does have issues. More people touch those ballots, whether it be postal workers or whether it be municipality workers, whether it be whoever, volunteers. I don't know who all is involved in the municipality election, who all is touching those ballots. But I do know that the more people you have touching them and the more people that have access to them, the more ripe for issue that a clean election can have. So I did work the primaries for the state this past August, and there was very good accountability. There was a good mix of some conservatives, some liberals working the election. So I felt really good. I felt really comfortable about where we are on a state level. But that, again, was before Ballot Measure 2. I don't know what Ballot Measure 2 is going to do for the lack of primaries and just, again, ranked choice voting. It's just, it's ripe with all kinds of issues, misinformation, and that's something we don't need any more of in our society because we have enough issues with that right now. So I feel like Ballot Measure 2 is a big wild card for political strategy. I feel like, do we run two on one side and two on the other side? So to try to, it becomes more difficult to be able to just have a primary. One side picks a candidate, the other side picks a candidate. They go off to a race and they determine, what official they want. So I think it creates a strategy game between the parties that are already there in existence that aren't going away, but yet are somewhat disenfranchised by the lack of a primary now. So I think that there are some major issues that we face. For
sure, and I think Ballot Measure 2 is a prime example of that Times article that Must Read Alaska shared about the strategy that the Liberal and the Democratic Party had in terms of how to change and try to get elections changed for the future to make strategies that they're imposing already more successful as we move forward. And I think this is the big thing, right? For me, I've always harped on this. In Alaska, I really think the biggest issue was the ballot harvesting. And it may not have affected the Senate race or the House race when it comes to nationally.
But my thing is yet. I think that's
right.
That's yet.
I
think this last election was just a laying the groundwork for more of that to come. because I definitely think that that's going to be. I mean, even in my own district, I had people from the Al Gross campaign come and some other folks, and yeah, ballot harvesting on a local level is more difficult, but these national campaigns that have funding coming from the outside,
Yeah.
you definitely can do that.
Well, for sure. And that had a trickle-down effect, at least on the ballot.
Absolutely.
Right?
I mean, our district for the Lance Pruitt and the Liz Snyder race absolutely had a trickle-down effect. And so, I don't know if you can quantify the numbers exactly of, the percentage of votes that actually swayed or affected. Because, again, when a Democrat votes or a person votes, I shouldn't just say Democrat, but a Republican as well. Anybody votes, they typically vote down the ballot. They're not just, hey, I'm here for this particular campaign. I'm just speaking on the Al Gross campaign because I had a guy from his campaign come and talk to me.
Right.
And I had already voted at that time. But the point is, it doesn't matter what candidate. If I'm a conservative or I'm a liberal, I'm typically going to vote down the ballot. So if you harvest a ballot for one person over another, the
numbers add.
Everybody down the ballot is going to be positively affected for whoever, whatever campaign you're working towards.
Yeah, it's a numbers game. Just because Al Gross didn't win the election doesn't mean that the ballots that were harvested by his people and out-of-state workers didn't have effect. I mean, how many votes did Lance actually lose by at this point? Like 12, 10, 9?
Yeah, under 20 for sure. So something super.
And the point is that obviously had an effect there. That race was going to be close, but every advantage that was had by ballot harvesting by the Gross and at least Galvin side makes a difference in there. Well,
correct.
Let's move on to another interesting point here. And again, this is an individual who is making headway and news waves and all that here in Alaska, but Senator Laura Reinbold was removed as a spectator in the House Health and Social Services Committee meeting here recently, and again it was yesterday. Senator Reinbold has been making waves with her very public feud with the governor. She also made waves earlier before that with her trip on Alaska Airlines and refusing to wear a mask and that whole thing. But this one was a very interesting thing because she was called out by Rep. Zach Fields, who's a very, very much left-leaning Democrat. It was kind of brought to the Speaker Stutes' attention. The Rules Chair got involved, and then security entered. And this is all caught on the closed-circuit camera here for Gavel, Alaska. So Reinhold, of course, had her phone out, so she recorded the whole thing as well. But, this goes to an interesting thing. I'm not sure how your relationship is with Senator Reinbold. I know, obviously, she represents Eagle River. But this is sort of an interesting development, more so specifically because of her public back and forth with the governor on various issues. So, I mean, are you hearing anything since you kind of are over that region? And, if you had some advice, what would you give at this point, if any?
Well, I haven't heard anything specifically as far as from her constituents or anything that way. I do think that the governor and senators' little feud they've got going is it's kind of comical and it's just kind of unproductive. I believe, the mask issue is such a hot button issue. It's just kind of like the vaccine issue. It's one of the things where, again, personal choice. We're Americans. We want freedom. We want to be able to choose what we want to do. We want to be able to choose what's best for our own health. And so, I guess I'm not sure. I guess the state of Alaska on state property, you have to wear a mask. Is that
that's
the
rules.
Current rule right now?
Yeah, that's what's going on right now in session.
So I mean, if she's making an effort to put on something, I think that's good. I think when they start, I think I read in the article that it wasn't an approved face mask.
Yeah, it was a face shield.
Okay, it's a face shield. To me, that people, if they're going to make the effort to do that, I still think that's making an effort to try to be protective. So I don't know. It's a hot button issue. I don't enjoy wearing masks myself. So, it's one of those things where,
right.
Is it a hill we're gonna die on? I don't know. I feel like it's not a policy issue. I like the governor. I like the senator. I wish they would just move on, get to the policy issues that we talked about
Sure.
a few minutes ago
Yeah.
that are really affecting our state. Because right now, we don't need a in-state feud on something so silly. And I know there's probably more to it than what we're seeing. There's got to be. I mean, because obviously,
Right.
But
Well, obviously, it was a dig by Zach Fields
Right.
to bring this up. She was spectating. She was watching the meeting, so she wasn't even involved. She wasn't going to speak. It was a committee meeting she just wanted to be in on, and Zach Fields decided to make a deal about it. And again, she's an easy target because she's been so vocal against the governor, which is interesting because I would assume if I'm Zach Fields, I'm really digging that. But it was also the second time she's been asked to wear like an approved mask. She was asked by Senate President Peter Machicki, who advised her to wear a face shield, told her the face shield wasn't adequate. So she decided to just skip the Senate floor session, which to me is a big deal.
Yeah.
Like at this point, we need our legislators to legislate. And as you said before, we need to get back to like people like you and me sitting here going like, what's going on with our economy? What's going on with our schools? What's going on with our property tax? What's going on with a lot of things? How are we going to recover from this pandemic, this thing that has crushed? How are we going to recover from the Biden administration shutting down pipelines, shutting down oil exploration, putting in the most radical, green-minded Department of Interior ever? Like already looking at shutting things down, already looking at trying to make it impossible to explore. How are we going to do that? Instead, what we have is ticky-tack feuds. We've got crazy allegations. We've got people just saying, you know what, I'm not going to show up to the Senate floor because I don't agree with masks. Listen, you said it, I'll say it. I don't like masks. I have glasses, which makes it even worse. I go from cold to warm, and I can't see where I'm going in Lowe's. My point is that I think we're picking wrong fights. And I think we're picking fights with the people on our same team, and it doesn't look good.
Well, and I think that kind of even just crosses over into why we see the situation in the House that we do, where we can't get things accomplished. We can't form caucuses. We can't do things because we're so worried about who's going to get what position and how it's going to play out. And is this person a rhino? Or are they not? Or is this person are they going to jump ship? And so we end up wasting so much time and effort and energy on issues that don't matter, and we don't get anything done for the people. I really feel like the politicians that are in place, and this goes for Washington as well as Juneau, they're so far separated from what the actual issues are from their constituents. I mean, if they were listening to their own people, they would see, okay, hey, listen, we've got businesses that are tanking, we have people that are struggling. Why are we wasting our time with things that don't matter? Represent your people. I mean, it's not hard to be able to see the issues in your district. If you live in your district and you have your eyes open, you're aware of what's going on. You go to the community councils, or you at least know what's going on in your community councils. You understand what's going on, in your, if it's your Republican district, if it's your Democrat district, you represent the people that you got elected by. If you don't know what they're wanting or what the issues that they're facing, then I don't even know where to start. I mean, I don't know why we're getting caught up in these things that just don't matter. So
yeah, I agree with you. I think, like I said, my big thing is let's get back to the business that we need to get back to, which is ensuring that Alaska survives.
Right.
At this point, we're past the whole point of we can do these back and forths because it's maybe political points, grandstanding. Maybe it's just it's a prerogative, or more importantly, maybe it's a personal point that they're trying to make. There's a personal virtue to it. My point is that time is over. We're going to be in some of the toughest times Alaska has ever been in because of this administration. When I say that, I mean the presidential administration. I think we have already difficulty with our tourism industry. We're having difficulty and much more to come when it comes to our natural resource development. And not to mention the largest city in the state has some of the most liberal and very defeating people on its assembly and currently the acting mayor in that mayor seat right now. What we need is to change that, and we need to see that, and again, it goes back to ideas. Yes, you may have a principle, but the idea should outweigh everything else, which is the idea is we need to get people back to work, back to a lot of things. And I think you probably have something about this when it comes to like policy, right?
Absolutely. I think this can stem all the way up to the presidential election that we just saw. It's policy over personality. Policies matter. Period. I don't care who you are. Policies matter. Whether it's an Anchorage Assembly policy that says we're going to be the only city in the entire country that's going to make masks a law, those policies matter. Personality, whether they fight back and forth with, and they complain about being called names and things like that. Those are whatever. That doesn't matter. But policies matter. Are people going to want to move to Anchorage, Alaska when they find out what our city is like? Are we business friendly? Do we have good schools? Do we have businesses that are open and you can actually go out and have a meal with your family? Those are not inviting to new families. Really, again, if you and we already said this before, if oil and gas and other natural resources don't pan out over the next few years, Alaska is going to be hurting. So I think, again, policies are so important. And again, you see it from the Biden administration now, with just the executive orders and the secretaries that he's putting in to place for pretty much all different positions, whether it be, which the Attorney General, I guess Merrick Garland got confirmed by the Senate, I believe, today, and, continued left policies and left positions across the board is going to be detrimental to not just our state, but our country as a whole.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And one of the things that we've talked about here on Must Read Alaska, and specifically, is the power of the vote and why it's important for everybody to get out and vote, to have their voice heard. And not only that, but a lot of what's going on right now in the Anchorage mayor race is important. And Must Read Alaska put out an article here about the Anchorage mayor's race. Dunbar Robbins lead in the fundraising arena. Now, it's a little bit misleading in the sense of this. It's true they lead in the fundraising arena. When we look back at how much money they've, quote, raised. And so the first thing is that Robbins' report had him at $210,000, just a little over $210,000 raised here initially. Now, with actual Dunbar, that brings the totals that I'm looking for right here to about $312,000 to date as well. So Dunbar is really packing it in. And then behind that comes Dave Bronson with about $162,000, almost $162,500, and the list goes on from there. I think Falsey's got $130,000 ish, but the big thing is what do you think this says in your mind about the candidates? Do you think fundraising is a direct representation of percentage of population who will vote, or do you think it's deep pockets? I think there's some misleading things about fundraising right now in terms of the candidates. There's a lot of interesting, when you drill into the numbers, It gets very interesting. I'll give you an example on this one. So Dunbar has received a tremendous amount of outside contributions, more so than anybody else, even more so than Berkowitz at this time. I think when we did a podcast a couple weeks ago about these numbers here, and it was staggering, just the difference in outside influence and money for Ethan Berkowitz when he ran for re-election in 2018 versus what Dunbar has now. I mean, it's been substantial. Versus Dave Bronson, who has much more cash on hand. He's got about $144,000 cash on hand, which, if anybody knows anything, that makes it liquid. That's cash on hand, availability to create and do a lot of things quickly and be agile. So that's a differentiating factor when you drill down into the numbers. I know that, for instance, Robbins, he's had, he's contributed greatly to his campaign personally, whether it's from his campaign out of his pocket directly, or to his companies that are doing marketing for him that are a big part of that. So the question to me is what are your thoughts on this? I mean, you've seen the numbers. Where are you at right now in the local mayor election here in Anchorage, and kind of what are your greater thoughts on it?
Well, I think anybody that understands local politics understands unions have a huge say in what goes on politically here in the city, whether it be supporting local assembly folks, local school board members, and specifically the mayor. I think that Forrest Dunbar has obviously got a lot of union support. I think you mentioned out-of-state funding. I don't know. I haven't dug into his APOC reports. I don't know if it's a lot of small donations or if it's mainly larger, donations from, let's just say, PACs and other things. I do know that, like you said, Robbins did have some of his own money, but I do think he's had pretty good support from the business community. I think Bronson as well has had good support from small donors and also the business community. But I think the landscape is different when you have the unions really pushing, one candidate. I think they control so much power within the municipality because, it's whether it's the police or the fire or the teachers union or, it's just there's so much power that the municipality has just in the union support. So I think obviously Dunbar, if he's getting that union support, that's a red flag if I'm a candidate.
Right.
To say, listen, that's some good support. We ran a campaign last year for Monty Dyson here on the east side of town for assembly, and it was interesting that he had a few different meetings with unions trying to get some support, and they actually liked Monty a lot. But he didn't quite get the support. And so obviously he fell short in that election. And so I think we've got to put credence towards the importance of the unions, even though a lot of people that are in the private sector don't particularly like unions and what they do and how they control, just and sway. But again, they do get their people out to vote, and they do, give a lot of volunteer time. Whether you call it volunteer time, maybe it's just paid time, but they do give a lot of time to the candidate they support. So I think that's something, obviously you've got to have private citizens that are going to get on board with the conservatives, because otherwise you've got the union support, and that's nearly enough to get you across the finish line in a local election.
Yeah,
so.
it definitely played a role in Monty Dyson's campaign. But I think, and additionally, February 17th, we, here at Must Read Alaska, put out an article about just the way that Forrest was receiving money. Now, at that point and up to that date, Forrest had received about $252,000. And of those donations, 21% of his donations were from out of state.
21%, wow.
Versus Berkowitz, which had 6%. Out of state.
So who out of state's trying to buy this guy?
Well, hey, I gave him. Listen, I took a little slack.
Okay.
Because I tried to give a benefit of the doubt. Maybe those out of state donations were snowbirds. Oh, I got raked over the coals. Like, hey, nice theory, but we all know that's not really true, and it may not be the case. But what I'm saying is that it's concerning to me when almost a quarter.
Maybe it was his mom in Portland. Maybe his mom was sending him some cash.
Maybe mommy insists.
Maybe that's what it was.
Yeah.
Maybe he's got some good homies down there that really love what he's doing up here in Anchorage, and maybe it's just going to be like morphing Anchorage into Portland. Maybe that's the grand scheme here.
I think you just made every listener cringe and maybe throw up a little bit in their mouth.
Okay, well, that's what we do here.
Yeah, but the reality is this: is that at least at February 17th, looking at the APOC filing, 21% of his donations have come from out of state, which is alarming because obviously you can follow money. You're beholden to those, right? So constituent-wise, if you have private citizens giving you money, it's because they believe in your policies and procedures. And maybe outside people do, but they live outside. They don't live within Anchorage. They don't live within the municipality. And the power of that money, which means those people may or may not have the ear to Forrest Dunbar when it comes to policy. And we've seen what we've done. Now, we've followed a lot of the policies that we've put into place over the last year and a half, have genesis in San Francisco, in Portland, in Seattle, down in LA. There are a lot. Denver, Colorado, another one. I've written stories about how a lot of the policies and the things that the Assembly, who's extremely left-leaning, wants to implement have been from very left-wing cities that have high crime, that have had rioting and issues with protests. They've had issues with homelessness. Mm-hmm. They've had issues with budgeting. They've had a lot of these issues that we're having, and we mirror those same organizations. And yet, here's what we do, Spencer. We keep going back to the well. Like we haven't learned the lesson. And you know why? It's not about learning a lesson, it feels like. It's about continuing down an ideology because we've all got to be. I'll give it to the Dems. I'll give it to the left. They will fall lock and step regardless of even personal feeling. It's all for the brand. It's all for the party.
Right.
Versus us in the conservative side, which we fight. I mean, you've seen it right now. We talked about it. We're fighting for principle.
Right, and I agree with you. It's the agenda. They know the agenda. They play by the rule book, even though there's not really rules there. But it's however they can get the agenda across the finish line. And that's just what it is. And I think it's very interesting now that you see some of these states kind of imploding a little bit. I don't know if you've followed the Cuomo issue here that he's got. Obviously, I'm not talking about the sexual harassment, but I'm talking about the nursing home issue that he's found himself in. And he's even got Democrat lawmakers in his own state kind of, coming after him now. Yeah. And so even with their own agenda, it's kind of self-imploding. I mean, whether it's the Me Too issue and nobody's defending and backing up his actions with that, or whether it's the COVID procedures that they can't really defend that because those weren't really.
Keep in mind, this was the guy back in August and July that the Dems were actually trying to get him to run for president. We forget that. Right. They were hailing him as the savior of the Democratic Party. Look how great, look how bad Florida, I can't think of the governor's name down there. DeSantis. And then you have Texas. Look how bad they are. Look how terrible they are. And yet, and he's taking all this praise. He's on CNN doing kissy face with his brother. And behind the scenes, it just never fails. Behind the scenes, he's lying, covering up deaths, trying to make it look less than it was. And it was already bad. So if he had to cover up what was already terrible to be shown in the stats in that sense, I mean, craziness. And that's not even including any of the sexual harassment, any of that stuff going on.
And I don't know any of that stuff. I mean, that's just like, there's accusations of all the time about that kind of stuff. So I don't really know to speak to that stuff. But you just look at, again, the Trump target's off, is out of the way now. And so what do you see? You see the left kind of starting to eat their own because they don't have anybody left to, they have the House, they have the Senate, they have the presidency, they obviously have the courts, it appears, and so what do they do now? They start to eat their own, and so it's quite interesting that what we're seeing now, and again, Alaska is just a microcosm of what we see, and it's just we've got to have some conservative leadership step up, and I think it begins with the mayor race here in April. I think we've got to elect a conservative. We've got to put forth a candidate who actually can get the job done. And one of the things I was talking to you about, Scott, before the show is, one of the things that Republicans, I'll just say conservatives, in general lack the ability to do well is the fact that they get elected, they get into office, and then it's almost a cleanup job from the bad policies that were put into place before they got elected. Instead of let's forge forward with good things for our people, for our constituents, for those people we represent. We've got to go back and clean up these issues that were created by the people that we replaced. And so I think that's one issue that, again, Governor Dunleavy comes in and he inherits what? Obviously the state's in a fiscal crisis. Well, I'm not going to say it's all the left's bad policies are their fault, but here again, can we move forward a conservative agenda when you've got these kind of issues? Right. And so I think that if we get a conservative mayor, it's going to take some time, whether it's an entire administration or whatever, I don't know. But it's going to take some time for him to be able to actually get some good, healthy policies to get homelessness down or get, let's just say, crime under control. It's not just going to happen with the snap of a finger and these issues go away. And so I think that's one of the things with conservatives that we've got to look at the long game.
It's the long game.
It's the long game.
Right.
Absolutely. So you've got to be hardcore. Listen, these are our policies. We know they work. We can cross-reference them to other time periods and other places in the country where they do work currently. We can't just adopt the San Francisco, Seattle, Portland, Colorado policies and just expect them to just, they're going to be great and they're going to be different. We're Alaska. We're different. We're different. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
You know.
No, I agree with you.
They failed across the board. Why do we think it's going to be any different? We can't just kill our small businesses and increase homelessness. And I mean, what's the next thing Anchorage says somebody's going to do? I mean, is it just checks for everybody? Is it just universal basic income? I mean, what are we moving towards? I mean, it's just. Yes, it's craziness.
So. No, I totally agree with you, and I think it's an important point you make, Spencer. And I think I hope our listeners, our readers, and our supporters understand this. Like, you know, if we are able, in terms of the city, if the city is able to make a decision the first time around, which seems unlikely, we're going to have a runoff. And the idea is this: is that if the runoff happens and a conservative happens to get in, you're still dealing with a very left-leaning assembly.
Absolutely.
You're still dealing with the fact that you're inheriting.
Right.
You want to make it even better? They just put out a press release a couple days ago that the feds are going to be auditing the CARES Act funds here in Alaska. So, I mean, you're going to have that. You're going to have a lot of things hanging over your head. And I think it's unfair. This is the problem. You can't get a conservative in office and then all of a sudden change and get upset because things aren't happening at the speed of light. Like, it takes time.
Right.
And so the long game is such a big perspective on this, for sure.
Yeah, and I will say this. I know there's a lot of conservatives that feel disenfranchised with the past election, with the issues there. And so I would say one bit of encouragement is we've got to press forward. We've got to continue to vote. Even if we think it works or we think it doesn't, that doesn't matter. We've got to continue to make our voice heard. And I hope that with the future of whether it be just our city, our state, or just our country, that we do start to get some of these election laws cleaned up around the country. I do know that Congress is working on a law that would be absolutely disastrous. I think it's H.R. 1, I believe. I have to go research that, but I think it's H.R. 1, and that would be an absolute disaster for America, expanding mail-in voting and just a lot of. They were even talking about changing the age of a voter and allowing illegals to vote, and just lots of different issues, banning voter ID laws nationwide.
Right.
So I think we've got to be careful on a national level, but specifically we can't just sit this one out.
Yeah.
I think that's what conservatives can't do. We can't sit this one out. We've got to get out. We've got to vote. We've got to put a little bit of money where our mouth is. We can't just complain on Facebook and we've got to actually put some labor into this. If you want to see things change, it's going to take some time, some effort, some money. Going to a meeting that's boring, whether it's your community council meeting, whether it's your assembly meeting, it doesn't matter. Or just getting involved in like I said, in the Republican Party or something that you can support. I'm not saying you support every candidate. I'm not saying you support every policy. But you've got to get involved if you want to see something change. So.
Yeah, I would say that's true. And speaking of this, we're going to hit our last topic here, and I'm going to make it quick because I don't think it deserves a ton of time. Forrest Dunbar, again, a candidate for mayor of Anchorage, decided to send out a letter. And Forrest is doing kind of a little bait and switch here. He's trying to really radicalize some things and make things in partnerships that are not available or that are not true at all, I should say. And in his letter, I'm going to read this to you. Our far-right opponents have embraced conspiratorial anti-science rhetoric that would have us ignore COVID rather than face it head-on. And here's the thing this is about as truthful as, I'm not even going to go there. This is a completely false sentence. What makes it worse is that he's trying to link these two because individuals on this group share articles about Must Read Alaska. But he says they support the toxic partisanship of Save Anchorage and Must Read Alaska. He continues, and worse, his far-right opponents hold events, and he's going after a candidate. His far-right opponents hold events where people do not wear masks, which threaten our hard-won progress towards restarting our economy. There's a lot of rich lack of self-awareness in that paragraph.
Absolutely.
And so there's a couple things I want to dispel. Number one is that there is no partnership between Must Read Alaska and Save Anchorage. There is none. And just because people share...
Well, he says partisanship. I think he's just talking about basically the what they would call right wingers or
Yeah.
whatever you want to call us.
Right. Well, I think
conservatives.
right. It's a clever. Yes, he does say partisanship, but by linking the two groups
Right,
together,
right.
an organization and a Facebook group, he's trying to
Correct.
make the correlation that we are connected and we're not.
Absolutely.
And there was an article that Suzanne Downing wrote, who runs Must Read Alaska, who put it beautifully. But also the lack of self-awareness here. I mean, number one, you're telling. I remember. Do you remember this? March, April. Hey, all you got to do is wipe surfaces and cough and sneeze in your hand, or in your elbow, right? To we got to flatten the curve.
I think I learned that in first grade.
Yeah, it's
maybe?
called. Yeah,
It's called
you sing your
common-
ABCs.
Yeah,
Yeah.
something like that.
We got to flatten the curve. We just got to shut down for 4 weeks. Hey, we've got to restrict everything and you're mandatory wear a mask. Hey, we've got to shut down during the busiest time of year for local businesses in December.
Don't forget 2 masks now.
Oh yeah, 2 masks.
Yeah.
And oh my gosh, we need to extend the declaration of emergency again because why? Oh yeah, we need to make sure that it's not about the emergency powers, it's about the declaration of emergency. They're not linked. Lie.
Well, I think one of the things here that he says threaten our, implying that he had a role in this.
Right.
Threaten our hard-won progress in restarting our economy. Isn't the economy halfway shut down because of what their bad policies did?
Well, that's again the beautiful ignorance and lack of self-awareness of this candidate. And I gotta be honest with you. I wrote an email to his campaign asking him again to come on to the Must Read Alaska show. I have yet to receive a response. I don't think I'll receive one. And this is the problem. Hey, if your ideas are that great, come on board. Here's what I said straight up. I'll even read the email because at this point, I just want to make sure that we're all clear that I am promising many things, including the following. Okay, this is what I wrote to the campaign for Dunbar here, and it's really very simple. I said, I'm pulling it up here. Good evening. I'm reaching out again to request Mr. Forrest Dunbar join the Must Read Alaska podcast for an in-person interview. As the producer of the show, myself, but also your gracious host in the midweek section, I would be more than willing to record, edit, and upload the show in its entirety while Mr. Dunbar watches the process to dispel any possible concerns about unfair editing. Hey, I will sit right next to him, do the interview, edit, upload, put everything on there so that there is no... I'll cut off the tail ends of silence, and we'll put it all on our show. Please let me know if you would be available, and I will work out all the logistics with you and your team. Thank you. I haven't heard anything back. I don't think I'm going to hear anything back. And this is just it. And I get it. Like, why would you come on, quote, I'm going to put this in air quotes, the enemy show. But my friend, I'm giving you a platform. I'm giving you a platform to a bunch of people who currently don't like you, but hey, win them over. Isn't that what we're supposed to do as politicians?
Well, here we're toxic, right? Support the toxic right wingers, right?
Right.
We don't believe in science, and we
don't believe in science when it comes to masks,
right.
but when it comes to other things,
it is kind of interesting that he doesn't show up to the meetings, the assembly meetings, because if the masks work,
hey, he was there last night.
he was there. Okay, great.
Yeah, he was there.
He's making a comeback, right?
Yep.
So, but
Well, I think his absence was noticed by many. So
Okay. So now he's making a comeback. That,
Yep.
that he wasn't there for a while, and yes, I don't think that's.
again,
necessarily good, but
also a lack of self-awareness. This went out to Geneva Woods residents who have united against many of Mr. Dunbar's policies. So them asking for, or him and his team asking for money to the Geneva Woods neighborhood who is not a huge fan of Forrest. Is that the nicest way to put it? I don't think they're a huge fan of Forrest and some of the policies and voting record he has. But regardless, just want to make it clear. There is no connection between Save Anchorage and Must Read Alaska. And also, I have now publicly said on this podcast again that I've invited Forrest, told him that I would do everything in front of him, so there is no question as to what goes out there. It's the full interview, and I will await a response. I don't think I'm going to get one. Spencer.
you'll be waiting a while.
I guess so. Well, that's it. Listen, we had a great time. Spencer, thanks for joining me.
Absolutely.
I really appreciate that. And listen, if you want to get more content like this, you can check us out on various platforms. I mean, first and foremost, you can go to mustreadalaska.com. You can go to, Again, you can go to youtube.com, you can go to facebook.com, Parler, you can go to MeWe. I mean, the list goes down, Twitter, and it's all under the same handle at Must Read Alaska, one word. Also, I want to encourage you, I thank all of our listeners, all of our readers, and all of our supporters. And because of you, we're able to continue putting out this great content. And if you want to continue to support Must Read Alaska and helping us continue to put out great content here on podcasts or our articles we write, our videos, so much more, please do so by supporting us. You can go to mustreadalaska.com and up at the right, click Donate Now. Well, Spencer, thanks again for joining me. I really appreciate that. And until next week, take care, Alaska.